suggest that introduce yourself and how many terms you served, and then we can go from there. Starting with Sam.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Sam Edgerton, and I was elected in the 1991 election in the fall, and I did 4 terms. And I was just looking at the time allotment. I did 8 years in the 90s, and I did 8 years in the 2000s. So somebody said, you know, are you going to come back to the 2000? And I said, hell yeah, because I did most of that decade too, but the 90s was more fun. I'll leave it at that.
For now.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can come back to it.
He'll say that with the next bunch too.
What motivated you to run for public office?
Okay, for me initially, and it changes all the time, it's funny, it's really coming back now. It's SB9 related issues. I really wanted to keep the neighborhoods in Hermosa low density. I was very dismayed by what I saw happening in Redondo. It was becoming like condo Redondo. So it's really come full circle, amazingly, out of all these years where they were going to chop up all these houses and just build condos, and the price of land was going up. And land use is always the biggest diet of any city council person. When you deal with city issues, it's constant about who wants to build where, and just making sure that the town would mature in a good way and in a responsible way, and making things better, that was a big deal for me.
Briefly again, we moved here. I'm an architect. My husband's an architect. We own an architectural company. We did a house down here for someone as a favor. And so we would come down here on the weekends. We live up in Santa Monica. Our office was up there. Everything, our lives were in LA. Most of our work's in downtown LA. It's big stuff. It's not houses, it's not beach. But we came down here and fell in love with this town. When it came time to buy, we bought a house here. And we recognized the beauty of this community, both physically, culturally, historically, the people, just where it is, this little jewel of a town by the sea. And we could, at the time, afford to buy our house then. We realized that the schools were excellent. And so coming from the big city that I grew up in, of Los Angeles, and all that encompasses, raising a family in a small town with pancake breakfasts and Little League parties and parades, and community involved in so many aspects of this wonderful town, we realized that this was a door that was going to be unlocked. That the people of Los Angeles were going to see, oh my gosh, why aren't we living in a wonderful little town with beautiful, fabulous public schools that act like private schools? We have our own police, we have our own systems here.
So what got you interested in getting more involved in the city?
Well, I was a couple of things. First off, I was involved in youth sports. I have a son and 2 sons and a daughter that were heavily involved in everything that has to do with youth sports. The basketball, I was a co-founder of the basketball league. We didn't have one.
Which is perfect since we hear the basketball
We hear
dribbling on
basketball.
us.
You can blame me for that, I guess.
Never built the superstructure for sports here.
But no, I was disappointed with the council that was seated, and I was a Parks and Rec commissioner, and they appointed me because of my involvement in youth sports, and I've always told everybody I'm going to be buried under home plate. And spend enough time here to visit.
It could be in your will.
You don't have to tell anybody either.
So with the JR Reviczky plate.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Like
Sure,
it.
I can do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
She'll design it.
Yes.
the other thing that got me involved was that I live right across the street from the oil well.
Okay, so that also was a linchpin?
That was a linchpin for me to get more involved. I could not, as a council member, of course, vote on that issue because I live too close. But I could certainly, when people ask me, why did you run? Because you can't vote on this thing. I says, yeah, but I can be their conscience.
And that was part of it. That was actually it, now that I think of it. I went to the city council. The planning commission had to read the EIR. I'm used to reading EIRs because that's what we do. We do big enough projects that we have EIRs. So I read it. It was filled with holes. It was inaccuracies, amazing. And so two of us, planning commissioner, there was another planning commissioner that was an architect, we both went to the city council at that time and said, you can't approve this EIR. This EIR stuff talks about the wrong number of wells. It doesn't tell you what's going to happen with this, that, the other. It was not good. So I was so wrapped up in this that I couldn't believe the council actually approved a contract to drill
That's why
wells.
Sam is not here today.
So, yeah, he was one of the ones that approved it. So that was one of the big ones. That was one of the biggest. I mean, I think I was against all of it. Yeah, and maybe I just liked
the
it.
linchpin.
I think so, and maybe I just am bossy and like to talk. I don't know, but but I think that I felt passionately involved in suddenly all the aspects of physical presence of this community.
Well, a lot of people call me Dick,
Okay.
but that's beside the point.
Okay.
But yeah, my name is Bob Benz. I got elected in 91. I ran on, what was the platform? Well, let me put it this way. My constituency was, the people that voted were the Depression era old ladies. That was one part of my constituency. And of course, the other one was the drunks and losers. So I served 2 terms, and toward the end of my last term, turned out that things changed in Hermosa, and the drunks and losers, you know, they never did vote anyway, but they couldn't afford it. And of course, the Depression era old ladies, they started passing on. So I lost my constituency, so that's why I dropped out. I did run for treasurer after that, and that was just to piss off John Workman. But I loved him anyway. But anyway, so...
Okay, so what are you doing, just a little bit more about your background, education-wise, how long did you live in Hermosa Beach? What motivated you?
Well, okay, so I'm educated I'm a mechanical engineer. I went to Oregon State. You can't lick my beavers. I moved down here shortly after I graduated in 1979, and I through a lot of different things because of whatever, you know, the time at the time was that, you know, public access was a big deal. So I started I hosted, I didn't really start it, but I hosted a show called Bergie Live. And it was advertised as having no redeeming social quality whatsoever. It was a call-in talk show on a Friday night, and that's sort of how I believe I was eventually elected, because I had name recognition. You know, I do cherish the time that I was in council. I think the 90s. Prior to the 90s, people only ran because they were angry, pissed off at something, you know, and I ran because I was drunk and somebody talked me into it. And, you know, I ended up winning. I lost pretty much every section of the city except the north end, and that's because I guess I had a lot of parties up there, you know, and
Okay.
I ran on the idea that there was no such thing as a commercial residential conflict, which even now people are running. I bet you did, right? Yeah, I'm certain that JR did too. But I mean, because it really is the realtor residential conflict, you know. Because if it was up to the realtors, you know, they'd take every commercial area in town and turn it into a condo because there's more money in that.
Hello, my name is John Bowler. I'm part of the Hermosa history. I was a local pub owner for many years and was a member of the city council and occasional mayor from 1993 to 2001. Well, pre-1993 even. We had, as local pub owners and so forth, the city council and government in general at that time was pretty anti-business. And we, as pub owners, had even formed a trade association called the Hermosa Beach Tavern Owners Association and so forth. And we had been backing candidates and trying to find somebody that would be pro-business on the council, and with no luck. And eventually I ended up running for office simply because we had to find somebody in there who wasn't devotedly anti-alcohol. So it had started actually 2 years before. The council had been, as I said, very anti-business and particularly anti-alcohol business. And then in 1991, two of the council members, June Williams and Etta Simpson, were replaced by Sam Edgerton and Bob Bergie Benz, which put the barbarians firmly inside the gates, and the town pretty much erupted at that point. There were 2 attempted recalls within 2 years, trying to get them removed because they were so much anathema to the previous business pattern or anti-business patterns on the council. So, as I was thinking, it was kind of the antithesis of the Tale of Two Cities. It wasn't the best of times and the worst of times. It was just the worst of times. And Hermosa, part of my campaign, I highlighted photographically, the downtown was just one business after another with closed, out of business signs. Everything was depressed. And on top of that, the national economy had dropped into a severe recession. So now everything was going in a tailspin, going down rapidly. And that was the environment into which we got elected in November of '93. There was, interestingly too, it was one of the larger elections. I think we had 13 candidates in that election. So when the dust had settled, it was JR Reviczky, Julie, and myself had all been elected. So it was a real sea change in the makeup. And whereas the 5 of us were an eclectic mix at best, we weren't antagonistic towards each other.
When you were on the council, what back in the 90s were the hot button issues that you had to face, and how did you deal with them?
Oh, there were plenty of hot button issues.
Give us a few that stand out the most.
The first night, the first council meeting, they bring a big packet, and I prior to going to college, I went to a Catholic school. I got kicked out, but the nuns taught you how to read, at least, and always to question authority. But, and there was this thing in the, not other matters, but whatever. They were going to release a contract for something like $250,000 for a sweeping thing. That was the first night, Anyway, so the first night was this contract that was given to one bidder for sweeping downtown about 4 or 5 blocks. And I was like thinking to myself, wow, $250,000. Back then, that was a lot of money.
Was that the one bidder you mentioned, just for more?
Oh yeah, it just so happened that the bidders.
Was that the person who bid, or that was pretty much it?
Only one bid.
Only one bid.
And the winning bid. And the guy that bid it was just so happened to be the husband of the ex-assistant city manager. Okay. I was like going, are you shitting me? And so I called up and called up the Ralph's, the Manhattan Mall, and asked those guys, they sweep. Like, did you get it? No. Anyway, so, I did get 2 other votes to quash it. Holy crap, everybody started saying, yeah, you're changing things. I'm like going, no, I wanted the job. Like hell, I was working in aerospace, making about a quarter of that. And like, I wanted, go down and sweep at the beach, and, I was unmarried and, God, that would be a great job, just sweeping couple blocks, like four nights a week. And anyway, so from then on, it was like I got into a lot of people's crawl because, I didn't think it would be that bad, but it was that bad.
So you actually had to work. Yeah, it was actual work. And every time you thought you had something solved, somebody would walk in and say, "Oh, by the way."
It's so bad in the first 2 years that we had to hire a new city manager. Remember, we had nobody to start with. And they said, basically, you guys are too stupid, so we're going to give you the list. And we hired, paid a lot of money, and they're going to tell us who the good candidates are, and that's all you're going to interview. That wasn't going to work with me. That's never worked with you. And Bergie, forget about it. So anyway, so I called over and said, I want to see the list of resumes, and I want to look at those. All of them. Come on. That's what I'm reading the city code. We're supposed to hire this person. They said, nope. And so I remember sitting in Bergie's pad right down the street from me on 30th Street.
Right. He
He goes down there and just steals them. And so he walks in, and the city clerk back then was, what was her name? She's in heaven now, but anyway. No, for her. Yeah, it was another one that was here for like 30 years. Jim, who did you have for city clerk back then?
Well, when I was on the council, it was Kathy Midstill.
No, I'm talking about
Barbara Fleming initially.
It was the city council person's Duke was her last name.
Oh, Lori Duke.
Lori Duke was there, right. So she sees Bergie come sauntering in, who she barely knows, and says, oh, Bergie, you're not going to do what I think you're going to do. And he says, you? And he grabs the stack, and he sails over back to his house.
Finally, they came up with a compromise that I could go up into the library and look at the resumes. So I did that, but then I ended up somehow photocopying them. And then they had a crease, and this is according to the police chief, because he went to the DA to charge me for theft of government property, and he wrote up this big thing and brought it up to the city, and they said that, well, Mr. Benz left, and I lifted the lid of his briefcase and I found that the resumes were gone and missing. And then when he came back, he returned the resume, and it was they were creased, consistent with being stuck in his shorts. This is our police chief and city manager, and he wrote this all up, and he wrote this, and then Kathy had a stink about it, Kathy Minstow, and brought it up, and so everybody was asking him, and like, well, Mr. Benz, I said, well, I don't know. And so I asked Steve Wisniewski, well, Steve, you say there was a crease in it, like, how do you know it was consistent? And, well, I pretty much know that, that's what happens when you stick papers in your pants. I said, well, did you test for any pubic hairs? And then Vince Stowe goes, this is outrageous! I said, outrageous? Are you kidding me? Jesus. It was like, we had better ratings than anything. And of course, there was a whole bunch of people that were like pissed off at me.
He and I we're going through resumes together. And we get the list, right? And Bergie's just so happy that he clipped these things that he's forgetting he's just pick 6. So I picked 6, and one of those guys was Rick Farron. And so we demanded that we interview this guy named Rick Farron, who was just coming out of the military. He had built the hinges on the Panama Canal. He'd done some pretty massive stuff. So anyway, we liked him. We did interview their can people. You could see it was a can job, like I won't get into that. But anyway, Farron becomes the next city manager. He lasts 2 years. He was decent.
By the way, that story, nobody can understand it because it's so utterly absurd. That the city council can't look at the resumes for city manager of whom they're in charge of hiring.
Well, now we have it for the record.
What?
Now we have it again for the record.
Yeah, well, it was. I'm sure Sambus will relay that. Now, but it was like unbelievable.
Interesting hot button that you had to deal with. how did you wind up ultimately hiring the person you needed to?
Well,
Or wanted to?
well, basically, once we opened it up, okay, so what happened after the, the resume thing, I just sort of, somehow the resumes got out. and then it ended up that it was, Casey tried to go to they actually went to the DA to arrest me for whatever, and for theft of public property or whatever, and then the DA here locally, I think it was Cartosian or whatever it was, but anyway, he said, well, the city code says that they're supposed to look for, they're in charge of, and so this is just, and so it ended up that we opened it up.
I mean, I'd have to say that the previous council that you were on, it seemed like they didn't get along. It was rather somewhat contentious.
I mean, 2 years?
The other council.
Oh, we had a fight the first night. They walked out.
So what we
The first meeting that Bernie and I were on.
what we were handed were
That's
two
hilarious.
things from that previous council. One, a very bad thing, which was they let an oil drilling contract in our little town. And the good thing was that they had hired a new city manager, Steve Burrell. And so we had the baggage and the good thing. And Steve was savvy, a businessman himself. He was able to take all of us who felt like we had something to offer, put it all together, and he was very instrumental in what went on from then on for the at least 8 years that we were on the council.
I agree. I can't say enough about Steve. He was.
Yeah.
He was.
He was. In the
He was a Babe Ruth
encyclopedia,
city
there's his
manager.
picture.
The other important thing, and I can't stress this enough, whereas we as council members and as politicians, have a tendency to take credit for the sun coming up in the morning, and naturally for those things that were accomplished. If the truth were known to most, we would have a statue of a guy named Steve Burrell in the middle of Pier Avenue. He had just been hired and appointed as the new city manager when we got elected. So we all arrived virtually simultaneously. And Steve was a multi-talented city manager with a long history, but more importantly, he had a long history with small beach cities. He got Hermosa. And for a long time, we had suffered under a series of city managers who did not. And dare I say, council members as well who did not. So this all came together serendipitously, but it was sort of, I hate to say perfect storm. I think it was the antithesis of that, but the perfect group to come together all at the same time. And Steve had an element of thinking completely outside the box, especially when it came to funding projects and things. So all of the things that you see down in the downtown and all those things that got accomplished would not have gotten accomplished had Steve not been there when we came in. So absolute kudos to him.
He's coming out of the north. He wants to come back. He grew up here in Palos Verdes, and man, I think he just made you look good. He just made us
He
all
made
look good.
all councils look good. And one thing that he did that I don't think he gets enough credit for, I'm sorry, this is about us,
That's
but
good.
nonetheless, this is really important.
He's part of it.
He negotiated the deal with the Plaza Schumacher, the Schumacher family. Sam and I were the ones that were on the committee
Amazing.
to meet with the Schumachers, go over it, give them a sense of comfort levels that they could spend their money, and it would be a wonderful thing for the entire community. But Steve put that together.
You need to explain what the Schumachers
Oh, it's Schumacher's. The plaza down in the pier is named Schumacher Plaza because they gave us, I think, $1.5 million
Right.
to put that together.
Incredible.
So it was really Steve who put that deal together, and Sam and I were just kind of icing on the cake. So we,
just didn't
and then the
screw
further
up.
council was the one that took the ball or took the.
Well, the Schumacher Plaza was where the lifeguard station
Yeah.
was built right there in the bottom. But even
Right.
better than that, if you remember, and I know you all do, is that before Steve Burrell came on board, we used to sell our street funds. I think they were called Prop C funds. Yeah, we were. Yeah, you got this pulled. But anyway, but we would find a way to give away something that the state was giving us every year for transportation.
Right.
And we had some lady that worked for the city that now worked for West Hollywood, and she had an angle in to the current administration, and she'd write us a nice letter saying, "We know you're not going to use your state funds. Do you want to sell them to us and make more money?" And we always said, "Yeah, we'll take that deal."
Right.
So in the meanwhile,
we
have anti-speeding
Yeah.
laws in Hermosa
Exactly.
Beach, which are the size of our potholes, that you can't go, more than 30 miles an hour unless you got a four-wheel drive terrain vehicle, and it's getting worse. And Burrell shows up, and without any fanfare, without any political whatever, he just says, "I have an idea. I think we can start doing some streets." And that was a big part of my later campaign. Keep it simple, but fix potholes. Nothing brilliant there, but you had a guy that could do it. And how many streets? I was thinking as I was driving down here on my e-bike, that guy probably fixed about 30 streets when nothing was really getting done, unless you were doing a sewer line before. He was doing them straight out, everything. And so when I looked down at how often have you looked down at the road and thought, that's the Burrell job from like
It really was.
1995? I mean, there's
Everyone
so
was
many of
scratching
us.
their heads before then. How are we going to pay for this? How are we going to do this? And in every step of the way, every project we accomplished on this council, and there were a lot of them, everything from the head of the pier to up here, where we did the skateboard park because kids wanted a skateboard park. We reconfigured the tennis court so we could accommodate it. We put in the parking garage and used county funds along with ours.
Brilliant.
Because
Okay.
Burrell made that happen. We did the Strand, we did the pier, we did the lifeguard tower. That's actually designed out of my company, but we did that, and all of it. And then we also had designs for all the way up Pier Avenue that got changed with future councils, and I think they did a good job with that.
That's what Kathy did. Kathy finished up with that.
Yeah,
I would
and
agree.
think-
I would agree with you about Steve Burrell. He
Yeah,
was
he
a
really,
gem.
because it takes a lot to turn a city's head around. To say change is very difficult,
Yeah.
and with this council, we were able to get that ball rolling and change the perception of what this community was and is and should be. And
So
will
much
be.
of this interview should be about, us is great, we're the history part of it, we get it, but the guy is missing from the interviews now in heaven is Steve Burrell. He was
Yes.
amazing, and he had no enemies. This guy, hold on one second, let me finish this. If you look at all the people in town, anybody sitting in that hot seat now has enemies. I see the emails, I see the traffic, city manager included. Name me one person alive that you can think of that ever hated Steve Burrell. I can't think of any.
No.
He just had the touch.
As a resident, I'm just gonna say, he did it low-key to
Yes.
where he didn't take credit for it, but let the council.
And
He-
you are absolutely right, which is why I feel so compelled
Absolutely.
to, we all do, and you
Yes.
do, to give him the credit now.
When we were
Yes.
digging the plaza down to the pier, and we were digging, it was like the ceremonial dig. So we had the shovel and the whole thing, and we're all out there, and there's photographs. And we were, all of us were saying, Steve, come over here. And he was always,
I remember that.
Yeah, that's right.
you know,
We had
always.
to pull him in that
Yes.
picture.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just that way.
Yeah.
One of a kind, it really was.
Super guy. And what do you think were the hot button issues that you had to face, and how did you deal with them? And two that I can think of, McPherson and Pier Plaza. The planning of Pier Plaza and McPherson. Do y'all want to talk about McPherson first, or?
Yeah, Pier Plaza was it was a hot button, but it was nothing like oil. that was one that was just wicked all the time. Again, my first city council meeting, we were handed another beaut, which is, oh, by the way, there was a vote from the last city council meeting, the lame ducks, and they had vested this oil drilling contract. So even though it hadn't made through all the different levels of review that are otherwise required by law, something I know a little about, it was now said, you know, by Ed Lee, the assistant city manager, and Bose, Charlie Bose, that, hey, this is, you know, a deal, and you have to do everything you can to get it through, because it's gone on so long, and it only to be fair, you just have to do that. So what does that mean? It means that we're not doing this deal unless it's right. And you know, it's extremely political. It had a lot of wheels and legs on it in '84 when the city was declared insolvent, and we needed money to buy the Greenbelt. And we had a lot of demands about what to do. Manhattan Beach was getting ready to buy their piece of the Greenbelt. We didn't know where our next dollar was coming from. You know, I'm drinking beer with Bergie, watching these guys in the '80s really tackle these almost impossible issues because we just didn't have the capital. McPherson comes in with some support, and he's got a head of steam. And the next thing you know, he's like the head of the Chamber of Commerce. You're watching that, going, whoa, you know, this guy's moving fast. And he wanted to have his oil depot centers on South Park. And they were trying to work a deal that, even though it's open space, you know, you can squint and look at it, and you see like an oil thing there, you know, it doesn't, you know.
So you do the math, we're gonna have a 165-foot tower there, 360 days a year, forever.
In the most dense neighborhood, like in the county,
Right.
with houses that, you know, you can throw a rock at from where you're
It
standing.
was really, you know, I think that I was appalled when I ran for city council that this was going through. And I think we all were, obviously JR was. And it took quite a bit of doing for all of us. Whether you wanted to think that oil drilling was a good thing or not, but all of us on the council had to come together and figure out a way to take apart this contract through environmental issues that were going to occur through. And it was really at a time when a lot of that hadn't been studied yet. And so we had to pull in experts that could
We'll talk about that. Hold on.
really look about.
Don't rush that one. That's a good one.
Yeah, well, that was behind the
so
scenes.
for 10 years we have it,
Yeah.
and we don't even want, you know, problem is you're always asked the same question, are you going to breach the contract? And I'm like, I didn't sign this contract, but I will promise everybody, and we really had to do it in a very deft and cool way and not panic.
Very, very, very much.
Some people panicked, some people
Yes.
didn't. And they would ask me, and I'd say, if they do everything that's required of them, I'm going to vote for it because we already have this contract. And I mean that even today. But they had to go through the process. They then walked away for about 5 years because the price of oil was going down. So they kind of went bye-bye. And it was rude because you got this politically charged contract. If you're going to do that, you better move it or lose it. And then all of a sudden they come back, and I remember that they had to go to the State Lands Commission and get a final approval. So they're like at the 8th inning of the game. And the State Lands approval says you have to have one more hearing, and Don McPherson is livid. And he's looking for us to scuttle this, and he comes to me, because I've always been fair. Ostensibly, I was trying to be as fair as I could. And says, we really don't need this. And I said, oh, yes, you do. And, you know, we're going to have an expert to see if this thing is really safe or not safe. Because they set the issue that came out of the Planning Commission as to whether there's a danger factor, a risk of catastrophic harm. And so we paid this guy, that McPherson had to pay for it. And we paid him $40,000. And he came out of Canada. And I still think, I may be the only one who thinks this, but the best thing that I got was McPherson agreeing that this guy was going to be fair. He was an oil man.
We had to have that.
Right.
That would be the only way that there would be any credibility for this,
Right.
for our stance to stand.
Right.
And so we had to.
Do you remember that night?
Yeah, I was the mayor at the time. Of course I remember the night.
And JR can't vote. He's in the sidelines and he's livid.
That's right.
He's already
that's right.
throwing
He
tomatoes.
recused himself,
Due to
but,
his closeness to the site?
What's that?
Due to his residence?
Yes, he was too close to the site.
Yeah, he was on the early meetings,
But
they got him
San
kicked
Pond was
off.
very important and very interesting because behind the scenes, we were counseled to be as honest and fair as we could, to understand all sides, and to work towards legally making sure that we were covering our bases in terms of how we would vote for this ultimately. And that was not perceived well in the community, because subsequent to all this time, there was a big community vote saying no oil. Well, that was after the fact, which was fine, but people didn't realize we had to be very, very clever about how we approached this. And we did. And the four of us that were...
Hold on, no, it wasn't 4.
Oh, that's
Bergie
right.
got knocked out too. Let me finish this one.
That's right.
So they're knocking out everybody, right? Bergie would have been a pro-oil vote. That was, obvious.
Yeah, we knew that.
One thing I love about Bergie is that you never had to guess which way he was going. He was, he would hold the line, and I think that's a good council person.
It's a wonderful
You don't sit there and
trait.
guess about this way or that way. And so anyway, we're down to 3 voters.
Who was the third?
The
John
people
Bowler.
that John Bowler, yeah, John Bowler. So as the persons are gonna, we had a quorum. We had 3 votes. Anything less than that, it's not gonna work.
Right.
So you need a minimum of 3 to get this done. And I would say John can speak for himself, but I think he was just in the same camp that Julie and I were in. We were just kind of looking at it. We just didn't want to give some guy a layup for a $20 million lawsuit
Right.
and blow it without going through the process. And I would say that time and time again until people got pissed at me, but I said, you just can't do it that way. And it was interesting, it was Rosamund Fogg, who was so anti-oil at that time, she did not want to accept this expert. How ironic is that?
I was gonna ask about
So
that.
so this guy is there, and the hall is filled with this militant mob that would be reminiscent of the Boston Tea Party. I mean, it was cooking with gas, right? And she's asking questions. I'm asking questions. I brought a dictionary, and the first time he had done this, he didn't answer the questions, and the report that he wrote was so vague, it was worthless. So we set another hearing.
We kept
We forced
pressing.
the guy to give us an answer. Remember this?
Yes,
We
absolutely.
come back next month, and I bring a dictionary.
Absolutely.
And now I'm on to him, and people accuse me of really beating him up, lawyer style, but I was not asking him leading questions. A leading question is where you say something to the effect, isn't it true? I wasn't doing that. This guy could have still said A or B. So the questions was, does this pose a substantial risk to the community? You've read the reports, you've digested everything, we paid you a lot of money. You got to answer that question before you go back to Canada and drink a lot of Molson's. You can't do that. You can't get out of here. And the guy was literally starting to get unnerved. I don't care. I mean, we paid this guy for an opinion, but hold up.
All 3 of us had a
So
variety of
he
questions.
said, well, what do you mean by substantial? So I opened the dictionary and I give him the definition right there. I mean, it was like, come on. And all of a sudden, I said, does this pose a substantial risk? You finish the story.
So he kind of takes his time. He looks down, and then he looks at the 3 of us and says, yes.
It's like,
And
I saw chairs falling.
The 3 of us all go,
Yeah,
it's like,
we knew it
let
was
out.
over. We knew
Yeah.
it was over. I saw chairs falling. I saw people
yeah.
beating each other up in the aisles. They were so happy.
It was even an article in the LA Times because it was just this little town, just,
I was heavily involved with the oil drilling. I walked neighborhoods, myself and Rosamund Fogg, who was a neighbor across the street from me. We put up a lot of money for the attorneys to challenge the environmental impact report, which was terrible. I lived in the kill zone, literally. There was a
yeah.
red circle around this project.
Well, and that's what finally, it took years.
Anyway, I think we killed oil for you.
We did.
We had a lawsuit. We had the lawsuit after that, though. That went on for a long time. But we had a factual finding that really did help us out a lot. And that guy in Canada has never been seen again.
That's right. And neither has McPherson. They went away too.
Which is good.
Well, that's all.
So for both of you, at the same time, it seemed from what you both were saying, that oil seemed to be the the motivating? Was there, if you can remember, were there other hot button items that, other than oil, that you both felt very passionate about, that you wanted to be?
Part of it was just getting along and not having
Stability,
egos.
when you say getting along?
Yeah, stability of a council, I think, was very important to us.
The council before us was
Contentious.
contentious.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty clear that
Yeah.
people were not being treated.
Well, they weren't getting anything done. That's
So it was more of that, where
to
people.
me anyway. Yeah. that
Yeah.
was- yeah.
And all 5 of us got along very well. Very well.
And for the most part, did the 5 of you back in the day, because you both were reelected, you mentioned earlier you had 2 terms that
Yes.
you served. Were you pretty much the same 5, or did you shuffle out some people during that time?
Well, I was there 16 years, so I served.
Yeah, so you
I
didn't
served
shuffle out,
I
but
served with
There were
lots of
several
people.
right. But during the
Yeah.
8 years that you worked together,
And the only
Was it
Bob
consistent?
Benz decided not to run again.
This most significant problems that Hermosa had at the time was mismanagement. I mean, they were incompetent. And it's pretty difficult to be incompetent as a city manager. It's one of the easiest jobs there is. But they were incompetent. And that incompetence went through the whole city. The city had this attitude of the city against the residents. It was like who I went up against. She was the business license woman. And my wife prior to me marrying her, she owned a brewery. And by the way, that had nothing to do with me marrying her, okay? Okay. I know what you mean. Okay, I see it in your face. That was very cynical. Anyway, so she's one of the first new businesses. And she goes up to the business license. And you know what that said to her? Expect trouble. What? This was it. I mean, it's like they had their golden goose. They didn't give a shit about anything. They didn't care about like businesses, which, by the way, the majority of the income of the city's income comes from businesses. I know the residents, bullshit. I mean, because of Prop 13, if you look at the business licenses, the sales tax, that's where the majority of the money comes from. And they just treated these business owners like pieces of shit. Consequently, that man was responsible for in my opinion, why the downtown at the time was a shithole. And the reason why is because nobody wants to invest in a community when you got a bunch of wingnuts that are in control. And by the way, it looks like it's turning that way again. Cycle. You get out. Just treat people nice.
That's gonna be the next question, actually.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, we're gonna lead into that.
Okay. Anyway, so that was it. It wasn't so much
So it's really the relations between the city manager, staff, businesses,
the
and
incompetence
residents.
of these people and
Was it
the
incompetence
arrogance,
or arrogance?
and that arrogance just like permeated the city.
And so now, do y'all want to talk about Pier Plaza? Did
You
that
know-
start?
With your
Again, we
council. We actually did some drawings for it, my husband and I. And we presented it to the council, and Bertie made fun of it, but he liked it. And to this day, much of what's down there did come out of our brains, my husband and myself. But what was really good, again, Steve Burrell, it was at a time when the community needed some guidance. And we felt this would be a great thing to do to shut down Pier Plaza from traffic. And that's a very difficult thing to do for any community. We went through that with the city of Santa Monica when they were doing the promenade. And thank you. And so we knew it would be a kind of an uphill battle. We knew it would be difficult and challenging, but we felt it was the best thing to do. We also left striping on the plaza. You can't see it very well now.
The handicap, you can see
So
that.
because of with the cobblestones, we created different colors so that we kept striping on there just in case
Just in
we
case,
wanted
yeah.
to park and have people be able to get access with their vehicles. But we had many meetings and community outreach sessions that helped us to gather the input from the community. Good ideas from everyone out there, as well as giving them our own ideas. And it was a real joint effort to come together and make this happen. Of course, there were the naysayers, there always are, but
Well, we had Reed also. Kind of,
Yeah, I mean, that's really where it started. I mean,
yeah.
I was not even elected, and I lived in Italy for a year and lived in Boston, and both are pretty famous for outdoor plazas, you know, the way they set it up, and a lot of great cities in Mexico follow that architecture. It's really fun. It's very cozy, brings you in. So I love that idea. So in the Rudat group that Mike Lacey, who you mentioned, and he had the Comedy and Magic Club, and it's sad that I'm mentioning that because that's no longer, it's one of the few non-survivors from COVID, but he had an amazing comedy hour. He was really well connected. I saw Chris Rock there, who's pretty getting the news these days and good people, but he used to host it for all the people that were interested. That's really where I started going to meetings. We did get qualified to get Rudat in. Jerry Compton and a few other architects were good at getting the funding, and you had to apply to get a free group of artichokes.
It's through the American Institute of Architects. It's a program that, and a team of architects will go into the community, analyze the community in all different ways, from the weather to the soil to the people and the functioning of the community and so forth. And
so there was already a group of people, and I was definitely on the side of no cars, plaza, European style, or Boston style. There was the other group of the Rudat people that were like, no, keep the cars. I remember a big car component was Dallas, what was Dallas?
Yost.
Dallas Yost?
Yeah.
Well, that's because he had a shop down
Had a
there.
shop there, but he was not having no cars, and it was really pretty wild. Like we're all friends, but it doesn't mean you always agree.
Can you define RUDAT?
Rudat was, it's an acronym for,
Regional Urban Design Assistance Team.
Yep. that's
And
good.
ultimately what they did was
Yeah,
not
that's right.
answer, there you go. Ultimately what they did is not answer the questions, they didn't solve the
No.
problems, but they opened the door for the community to look at various ways of solving various urban issues that we were confronted with. And
it chose.
those of us that I moved here right when that was all happening. Like, they're architects, I know what to do. They don't know any different. But what they did was really create a sense of legitimacy, because they were a group that were outside the community, that had no interest in what was going on other than what their profession were going to do. So there was no influence, there was nothing else. They lent legitimacy to what they felt were answers or ideas to what could go on in our community. And so that was very important. I think because we had some architects here, people were a little wary of what their own interests were and their own desires. So this was a group from outside the community, came in, gave some answers, and set up workshops and so forth. And that was really the beginning, the backbone of what started the community to look forward.
The Rudat Fair was actually the next building over.
Yeah.
And everybody brought their designs in, but in the end, I talked to them all personally, and I had been involved in this in the very beginning, and I knew they all wanted to do a walking plaza, but even they were getting heat. So in the end, they come up with this dopey plan, but I do agree with you, like it was still rolling, And their plan was to have cars down the plaza and they would exit down the alleys. I mean, are you kidding me? That would be the worst thing ever. Can you imagine like where Hermosa Cyclery is having exit lanes down there? So while they did well, they were appreciative, the plan sucked. But we just went on from there, and I think we had such an army. And meanwhile, I'm meeting with the guy, and so I was doing a lot of research on the ones, and I was really interested in the group that did it in Boston and New York. And that was a family that did it, and it was really interesting. It was really cool how they did it. They didn't let any McDonald's in or any chain restaurants. They just made it like this really kind of a neat area with an iron fist about who was going to go in, like chess pieces. Fascinating. It was like this Raff family out of the East Coast someplace. I met with the guy that did the Santa Monica promenade up there, where she had an office.
Well,
But I actually
we
met
were
with the
actually
guy.
involved with it, so.
Yeah, but I talked to him, and he wanted too much money to kick it off the ground. You know, Santa Monica was paying it. You know, he was from George Washington University, and he was a great guy, gave me a lot of ideas, but we needed cheap eats. We
Yeah,
couldn't
and part of
afford
the
it.
problem with him was that we are a small town. This was small change
Yeah.
compared to the promenade. And so we worked with him since we were involved in the city of Santa Monica as well.
Yeah.
And by then, we kind of had figured already what direction we were gonna go, what we sort of felt we needed in terms of
Well,
a firm outside the community to come in and give us a hand in accomplishing it, so.
but even there, I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but the plaza was voted in with the necessary final vote, 3-2. Made it by one vote. I'll leave it at that. So I don't want to start any fights, but it was another famous/infamous 3-2 vote. And we got it by. And I'd like to say that the only time I think I was a little bit less than forthright with the public, with Dallas Yost clipping my heels, was when all of a sudden we were supposed to have a curb design, and the curbs at the last meeting, she's an accomplice, they disappeared. There's no more curbs. Now it really looks like a walking plaza. And the best thing you can ever do when you walk down there, you still have a handicap parking spot
yeah.
in the plaza.
Yeah, it's still there.
Yeah.
We lied. So then we just told the people, just check it out and see if you'll like it. And some people were really PO'd at me because they said, you kind of got away with one. And I'll admit, to this day, I did. Because everybody started to love it. And then I think we put it on the ballot like a year later to see if they really liked it. And it was like a 70-30% vote.
But you have to do it that way. You have to start it. You can't just completely change something for people who are not interested in understanding what that change might be. It's hard for people to visualize. It's hard for people to understand how it's going to function, what it's going to look like, all of it. So it really was important to kind of bridge between accessible parking and a plaza pedestrian owner.
For sure.
Well, didn't the parking structure get built under your term?
Yes.
Yes,
So did
Yeah.
that not help offset the need for?
it wasn't until much later, but
It was 97 was the plaza. The hotel was connected with the parking garage project, and that was a county deal. And
right,
again, Burrell all the way with making the county parts.
right.
How that started was, and you'll like this because you were part of the Greenbelt. So we had a bond on the Greenbelt, and county really wanted us to support a recreation tax. Remember this?
Mm-hmm.
First time we're all against it. A lot of us are red on that council. We're like, no way. It goes down in flames. We're getting to know a guy named Don Knabe who's pretty good, way better than his predecessor. He's a deal maker. And he comes up with this dastardly, beautiful plan that says, if you support this one, we'll make you first for recreation money. And here's so Burrell goes to work. You're not going to believe he comes back because you're not going to believe they're giving away the store at Hermosa for the first years. They are going to pay off the Greenbelt debt. That was in the millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Remember this?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, that huge problem from the 80s is gone. We're going to pay it off. And it's county money, not our money. They are going to build a parking lot for us that'll allow the bottom floor, the bottom story, to be sold to the hotel for $1 million. Chop Keenan was the hotelier, the one to come and develop it. And so that would park the hotel. They would have a space. So that's why the bottom floor is dedicated to the hotel. You
Right.
can't get in there.
Right.
And they would, and guess what? We would get everything from the county in a 25-year deal. And Mr. Accountant over here calls me every 2 years and he tells me, how quick we are to get this back. How many years we got before it's ours?
It's pretty close.
Yeah. This is where JR comes in, so he knows all this stuff like that.
It was an interesting meeting because,
Yeah, it's incredible.
let me say one more thing about the plaza, is that Jerry Newton got all them property owners down there to assess themselves and pay for a portion of it. They paid for 25% of the cost of the construction.
They weren't all happy about it.
They weren't all happy about it, but all they needed was a majority,
Yeah,
and they're happy about it now,
yes.
We did the plaza for about 600,000 or less. as I
I
recall.
believe that's true.
Yeah.
So it's amazing.
Under
Think about
budget
that.
and
It's like-
under time.
yeah.
Same with the pier. Same with, I think,
Yeah.
everything we
We
pretty
did,
much.
finances and the nuts and bolts and all the other stuff, and everything was just fine. And the county attorney was sitting at the table with us all, right? And he said, "We got a problem here," and perked up and Steve said, "What's the problem?" He said, "We don't have a depreciation clause in here." And I'm going, this is all I could do to keep from smiling from ear to ear. So they put a 25-year depreciation clause in a contract without us requesting it.
Right. That's
Which means that first 25 years, we were sharing revenue, parking revenue with the county. And after 25 years, it all reverts
It's
to
all
us.
ours.
That's all ours.
All ours.
Yeah, I should have said that. It's a 50-50 split on the arrangement. We were happy. They were building the building.
Right.
We were getting a hotel and getting, hotel tax.
Yeah.
All these
And they were
things
not
were
happy
snapping into
because they had
place.
to pump all the seawater out of the bottom.
Yeah, no, it was a big
To go
project.
shoring.
It was a big
It was not a
project.
cheap building.
And our council was involved in the rehabilitation of the pier.
Okay.
I mean, basically, we were involved in that. And by the way, it turns out I voted against that. That was one of the votes I shouldn't have voted against. I mean, the other guys were right, although I'll never admit that in public.
It was severe.
Along with finances.
Right.
And the city was in pretty dire straits when we
Right.
got elected. I just looked up what our budget was back then. It was $10 million, and it's $36 million today.
Yeah.
Which I'd love to have that money. And that's only the general fund. That's not all the other side funds
Right.
that we had.
I remember that Jared was the best for the accountant. He was like this little old lady. You got those little numbers and stuff and this and that.
I was the one
Like,
like, spend
please.
it, spend it. We want to make this town
Somebody had to do
beautiful.
it.
But it was
Come on.
good. He kept me. We waited for Jared's role, and they all got used to it. They all knew. Everybody asked their questions. Mine were like 30,000 feet. Hers were more about blueprints. Jared's like,
Blue
let's
for
go to
the
this little.
vision.
Let's go to look at this little line item here, right? I'm like, what? But he was really good at it. I love that about him.
That's true.
The thing was that, again, as we list all the problems that were there, among them, the county of Los Angeles had just come to Hermosa Beach. Maybe some of you know, is lucky enough to be one of the very few places that owned their own beach. It was not the county of Los Angeles's beach; it was Hermosa's beach, and we contracted with the county for lifeguard services and so forth. Well, they had come to us and suggested that maybe we should start paying for lifeguard services, et cetera, we were already having trouble paying for things like police and fire, and then adding that on was going to be unacceptable. The other thing was that because of the downturn in the economy, the fact that Hermosa had a lackluster business economy to start with, we were in desperate straits with the city budget. And previous councils had never budgeted for unanticipated things, like if you needed a new fire truck, say, and had to come up with $100 and some odd thousand all of a sudden, that simply crashed a good part of the budget. There was never any planning that you might need to, at some point that fire truck was going to need to be replaced.
With the opening night, and I was mayor on my rotation when this came through, I used to ride a skateboard up and down the Strand where it's nice, even, new cement by us, blah, blah, blah. And I was coming up the street, it was uneven, and I clipped the curb and went, all of a sudden I'm flying. And I'm like, whoa, I'm gonna tear these pants. So I'm a big guy, and I wanted to land like a gymnast in a push-up position, and I did. I remember I didn't drop a knee, and I was so proud of myself. I had this like searing pain in both elbows, searing. So, okay, so I got up, I started getting on the skateboard again, got really dizzy, like a prize fighter's about to get knocked out with this smile, they're gonna go down. I'm just like this. So I have to walk at the last block, right when I got here. I came in, gave a speech. It was kind of, all these kids going wild, mostly young boys, on skateboards. And I was trying to take off my jean jacket. I couldn't take it off. And so I was already swelling. Anyway, so the end of the story is I broke both radial caps here and there. Had to get them all bandaged. And
I like my story better.
yeah, I don't know where you're
More
going.
fun.
But my cousin, who was a truck driver in North Carolina, who was listening to the Harvey radio show, he had real dry humor at the time, and he made a joke about me, the opening night of the skateboard park, breaking my arms. Mentions my name, so Joe Martin pulls over and calls my aunt, who calls my mother, who says, sadly, it's a true story, and he just started laughing. It was really pretty good. And made the Daily Breeze opening line was, the Hermosa Beach has had its first casualty. Well, sort of, but it had my picture on it. So anyway.
Because I'd be looking at the check register, that's one of the things in, other matter, the consent calendar. Now you looked at the check register, and here's a goddamn check to Steve Wisniewski, $50,000. And of course I was like going, every other week, it was 50,000, 40,000, 50,000. He'd go down to B of A and he'd get cash. And then I'm like going, what is this? And he says, well, this is a flash, we're doing flash, we need flash money for undercover sting, for drugs. I'm like going, Steve, what is it? Do we have amphibious craft landing on the shores of Hermosa? I mean, come on. You know how much $50,000 of coke is? I mean, I had sort of an idea. Not that I know but it was just, and then at the time, I kept on asking questions. I went to a bar and one of these banker guys who I was drinking with, and he was like going, by the way, they have to count hundreds. So if I were you, I asked the 100 count. So I go to Gary Bruce, who was the treasurer at the time. And by the way, Gary Bruce hired the son of a bitch from Roswell, New Mexico. And he was a former council member too. He's departed, he's probably, I don't know where he is, but I said, hey, Gary, I'm going to bring this up in council unless you don't want me to, but hey, can you get me the 100 counts going in and out? At the counts of the 100. Well, it turns out the 50,000 was all in hundreds. And guess what? It came back. Everything came back. 2 weeks later, there was 50,000. Mm-hmm. And guess what it came back as? Something other than 100. And I'm like going, holy shit, what's happening? I mean, how is it that $50,000 goes out in 100 in a flash and you're supposed to open up and close it, the rest of the guy, right?
Sounds a little bit like laundering.
Oh yeah, and guess what? Then I just flew a bitch because we had a city that was when who was the not Creans, who was the guy that was the city manager before Burrell, the military guy, and so I called the FBI, and so then we get 2 FBI agents coming to our closed session. And you know what they said? Yeah, we looked at this and yeah, there's definitely something wrong, but we feel that it's probably better if you at the council level handle this internally. I'm like going, are you kidding me? And then you weren't there, obviously. What was it? Albert Weeman's, got up and don't talk to the man of law like that. I was just shut the hell up, you little shark. Anyway, that was like what happened, and the FBI knew about it, and then pretty much not Weeman's, but the short man got fired, but not before Mary Rooney who was then the acting city manager after that. Mary Rooney gave him his retirement, and so then there was the big lawsuit where he wanted to quiet us up, and of course I didn't go along with that. It was so crooked. And then it ended up he got out of here and then went over to some Texan town. Guess what? Did the same thing. He was taking the coup de grace that really did him under is that he was taking asset forfeiture Mercedes Benzes and driving them around in town. Jesus Christ! How can you get that bad?
That's quite.
Did you know any of this?
No,
I'm
glad that you're.
He was sort of into it, except that he was drinking at the time.
It's actually shocking, actually.
No, it was more than shocking.
Yeah.
I mean that the money would go out in hundreds and then come back in something other.
Something.
And everybody else, and like some of my supporters, like Wilma Burt, and Wilma just loved this guy. I'm like, Wilma, he's a crook. But this is what was going on. I mean, he was our city manager. Jesus.
I wonder how many of these people that are involved in this story may be behind bars today, for all we know.
No, yeah. Well, they should have, but then,
The whole issue of building code density and all that. Did you at the time? I know when we were on, we didn't think about what this was going to do to affect values. Which today, of course, everybody is concerned, well, not concerned, they're pleased with the values that have risen, but was it part of your discussion at the time?
No, it was lifestyle.
Yeah. Okay.
Lifestyle is what dictated how we approached zoning codes. I think we were all feeling very much like we wanted families to come, we wanted people to come, whether they had children or not, and enjoy and vest their interest in Hermosa Beach. It wasn't, we didn't have the vision that it woulda, coulda, shoulda. I mean, if we'd all known how much value would have gone into these dwellings and residences that we all own. But no, it was really just lifestyle. We wanted to make sure that we were a walkable town, that we were a town that people would come, invest, and stay.
Okay, and how about the state today in terms of coming back on the cities and like telling Hermosa that you need to find 558 affordable housing units?
Well, that's not unusual. When we were on the council, we were the fifth densest community in the state, and the state was always coming down on us saying, you need to find more residents, you need to find more residents. Well, where? I mean, there are some areas that I would say, sure, I think we can do potentially mixed use in our little industrial. I would love to live and work in my industrial building. I think that would be great.
Pretty much can, yeah. I want to answer your question though.
That's where I would like to see it go.
We had a secret, and again, this is Burrell helping me out. So at some point, it might have been really about the 2000 timeframe, we were getting a lot of heat for not having enough affordable housing, okay? And, of course, we're dense, and she's recognized that, we all knew that. And the problem is when you over-densify, it's not just doing the construction, the traffic patterns go to hell in a handbasket. One of the reasons why, Santa Monica was like a lost paradise. You can't drive through there anymore. It was a really cool place in the 80s, and I used to go there all the time, but, trying to go through there today is very different. They have just overbuilt it without thinking about what they were doing. Because once you screw that up, it's permanent. Unless you get public transportation, excuse me, you got a problem. But I was really into the mode of just outright militarism and not say anything. And Burrell says, well, not so fast. You know that the trailer parks in town account for affordable housing. And I said, oh, you beautiful guy. And those trailer parks are actually pretty cool places. So if they count, and he took the count into consideration, we made it. And it was happening just at a time when there was another big realtor group that wanted to knock down that trailer park behind the post office. And of course they wanted to build condos, you know, what else is new, right? And so I came flying out and saying, no, no, no. Of course, you know, I was sort of infamous for getting into fights like this, but at least I had a reason for doing it. Like, hold the line. We need that trailer park. And for some reason, they were getting into it with the school. They share a line. Never understood that one. It was stupid. But anyway, the trailer park ended up surviving. They ended up buying their own park. And they gave us the necessary stats to not have to get into this stuff. And, you know, Torrance had to figure it out a different way. Although, I don't know, they have a lot of trailer parks there too. But it was a pretty amazing find that we had that.
Okay.
I think one thing that's significant too is what you just touched upon, and that is that the residents themselves of the trailer park behind the post office were offered to purchase their trailers and the land. So in a deal with greater ownership in a cooperative way, but it was a somewhat unique way to approach it, and it gave them a sense of, again, investment.
Yeah, home ownership.
Yeah.
I'm never going to worry about a Section 8 owner if they own it. You know, you're not going to find someone parking their cars on the lawn where you see in other bad neighborhoods. By the way, we're supposed to call them mobile home park, so correct me, I'm old school, but that's the real name for it. But when I campaigned, of course, you know, being a politician who likes to kiss babies and shake hands, right? I would go through there. And they were the most wonderful group of mostly retirees that you will ever meet. I mean, I can remember going down to St. Patty's Day parade with my family, waving in a convertible. And there was some lady there that had just been in her trailer. It was all old mahogany from the 50s. I mean, you could put this trailer in here. It's so cool. Had a cup of coffee with her, you know, and she was yelling at me, saying, I waved to her back, and I just thought, this is so awesome. Like, she just walked around the corner out of her little old trailer, you know, just to be part of the community. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. I'm sorry, but it just doesn't get any better.
It really made a difference. Really made a difference. I have to tell you, the League of California Cities voted our city council twice. The most fun city council in the state of California.
That's crazy.
Wow.
You know, Bertie mentioned that in his interview, but I didn't know it was true until you said it.
It was. We were all standing up there in Sacramento saying, ooh, wow.
I mean, Bertie
Although
is-
Manhattan was second, so. And we'd go out with them too, very often, so.
Okay, so it's the little city that could and did.
We turned Hermosa from a place that everybody was ignoring. It was pretty, you know, low life, downcast, nothing but a series of empty businesses and so forth, into one of the most dynamic cities in the South Bay. So,
Looking back since you last served back in 1999,
Yeah.
what major community changes have you observed here over the past 23 years?
Well, the
What
biggest
changed to you?
Well, the biggest thing is the affluence and the influx and the rather insidious. It is what it is. There's nothing you can do about it, but it's definitely very, very much more affluent. See, at the time, Hermosa was somewhat of a community unto itself, and now Hermosa is more or less resembling, you know, South Manhattan Beach, you know, and there's a sort of what I call an insidious degradation of what makes Hermosa,
What
which
does make Hermosa?
the beach.
Okay.
We are the most populous city this side of the Mississippi in square footage, people per square footage, and I mean, we resembled something like a Greenwich Village, you know, in population. And the redeeming quality is the beach, and yet nobody goes to the beach. I mean, even, you know, some of my former council members don't go to the beach. And it's the only thing that's redeeming about Hermosa, and yet nobody knows about it. I mean, it's getting so absurd that people want to, like, you know, build a swimming pool when you got the best swimming pool in the world. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, but that's the thing, you know, like, you know, I mean, I remember going to, like, and talking to people, you know, because it turns out I do like to talk every once in a while. Anyway, so, I mean, you know, they'd say, yeah, I don't let my kids go to that beach. I mean, you know, surf and the beach and, you know, the ocean is what makes Hermosa. And, you know, now you've got people that are, you know, paying millions of dollars for places, and they're stuck in their little home. And guess what? They're stuck in this little enclave. And because they don't know the beach exists, they're like caged rats. You know.
If you had the opportunity to change that image.
No, I think I was part of the problem. I was part of the problem. What happened was that, I mean, all the investment that happened. Now people bitch and moan about bars, you know, having too many bars. My motto at the time, and still is, that we don't have too many bars. We have too few bars. We need more bars, because that's really the only thing that can thrive down there. You know, you're not going to put in like a little haberdasher or something like that, you know, and then make money. But the other thing is that the folks here, they're residents, and they are getting my age. Actually, I'm an old fart now. I'm 65. I mean, they don't realize that Hermosa is still pretty young when you look at the demographics. I mean,
so John, if you could go back in time and change one thing you voted on, what would that be?
That's interesting. I weigh this in as well, because it's not. I don't think I would change my vote, but I still struggle with it to this day. And that was, I ended up being the deciding vote on the oil issue, just the way it came about. The council, we were down to 3 votes on the council because 2 council members, JR and Bob Benz, were both too close to the project, so they couldn't vote on it, which left Sam and Julie and I. And one was on each side of the issue, and you needed to get the 2 vote majority. And I had been in favor. I wasn't in favor of the oil issue per se, but my contention as a businessman in particular was that the prior councils had signed a contract with the oil company, and that once that was done, I didn't think that we could ethically renege on that contract simply because people now had buyer's remorse. And I was expected, they were to come back with a number of what was the likely possibility of someone being seriously injured or killed over the lifetime of the project. And I had expected that to be a very high number, and it came back at 75-1, which was much lower than I had anticipated.
Wow.
So at that point, I ended up voting against the project, and then that started the whole history of lawsuits, et cetera, that all stemmed out of that decision. Yeah, so I hated doing that, and I hated siding against the oil company who had an existing contract, but that number was just untenable for somebody who was concerned about the city.
Maybe if you recall, if you could share some of the, quote, good things that you felt you accomplished, other than, you mentioned the oil and getting that whole thing reversed, the council decision, you know, to allow drilling, and then to basically, with the initiative and changing everything out. What else did,
I would think
feel you
one
accomplished?
good thing that was very significant about our council was that every one of us had something to bring. as I mentioned before, JR, there were 3 of us in construction, so, especially JR and me. So certainly the physical improvements that this community wanted to make, we made easily, quickly, on budget, on time, with Steve Burrell at the helm, with us doing punch list. You know, we were hired,
Sure.
well, we weren't hired, we were doing it for free, but we did, you know, as I say, you know, the designs for the pierhead, the pier, the bathrooms, the tower, the gates, all that stuff, the Valley Park bathrooms, all that went on here with the skateboard park. We had the kids come and work. JR was instrumental in making all that happen there.
There's the youths.
And the youth, there you are. And you know, we looked at the tennis courts and we said, this is not a good use of space. So we redid them, we shored up a little area, you know, we reconfigured it so that we could still have parking, have the skateboard park. Don Kanabi was involved with Steve Burrell. That was a wonderful marriage of 2 people who could really have things happen monetarily as well. So I would say, and on top of that, then John Bowler, who was not really involved that much in any of this, he brought First Night to this community. And for a couple of years, that was an amazing, wonderful community party on New Year's Eve, family get-together party with the venues. If you don't know First Night, you have to look it up. I won't go into it too much, but it's an amazing, amazing, it happens around the country in various communities where people will open up their restaurants, their businesses, and have jazz in one, classical music, poetry reading, art shows, food, you know, just all, and it starts, I don't know, at 11 o'clock at night or something like that. Everybody's in costume.
As I recall, wasn't it New Year's?
It was New Year's.
Yeah.
It's the first night after New Year's, so that's why it's called that. He brought that. Sam was good at negotiating things when you just kept to the subject. Sorry, Sam, you're wonderful. But, you know, I mean, he and I were put to the task of getting the money from Schumacher. And so, you know, each for the plaza, to fund the Pier Plaza. So each one of us really, really contributed, I think, quite substantially.
You know, I want to add a story about the skate park because I was appointed by you guys to sit with these kids and design the park.
Patient.
You know, and we met right here in the community center, and we had, I don't know, maybe a dozen meetings or so before everybody decided that this is what it was, you know. And I would watch these kids figure out what they wanted and how it had to blend together and everything else, and then sometimes they go, no, that'll be too hard for the little kid. We can't do that. Let's make it easy, you know. So I was just, you know, I was moved by the fact that they didn't just think of themselves; they thought about everybody that would be using the park. So that was and then they came to council and presented to us, and you know.
Yeah.
You know, one thing in that spirit, and I'll use this word, visionaries. And what I found here, and I'll have my chance when we get into the later years, but what I found is a lot of the elected officials who preceded, you know, me when in 2000s, the 90s, 80s, had vision. And what you were able to do, and using the skateboard as an example park, later on, Redondo Beach, Manhattan Beach, everybody started copying what Hermosa Beach started. And it's like, we're the smallest, we're the middle child, you know? You have Redondo with its size, Manhattan with its money, and then you have Hermosa who's in between. And it's like all the good ideas and vision. And you can have vision, but at the same time, vision is only as good as the funding you can get to do it. And you guys were able to see things ahead of the curve. And ultimately, you started it, and now it's like everybody's copied it. Redondo has a skateboard park, Manhattan has one, but it all came later. And they always come back here and say, say, how did you do it? Or let me take pictures and bring it back to my city. So, am I right?
Yeah.
Yes,
But
we
we would
were.
go every year to the League of California Cities Conference.
Right.
And it's a conference that's held for elected officials, and every city in the state of California is invited to attend. And the year that we were working in the skateboard park, I actually got asked to be a presenter at one of the many conferences that they had for other cities that were thinking about doing this. How'd you guys do it, you know? I said, well, you know, we did it ourselves. That's how we did it, right?
I mean, a lot of it too was, you know, it's taking that vision and saying, if this is what you want, we'll make it happen. And we did. But it took, with the skateboard park, there were only maybe 2 skateboard parks in the state of California at the time. And I remember we contacted them and said, liability, liability, liability. What did you do? How did you handle it? How did you work with this, that, the other? And they had good and bad things to say. And we could have dropped the whole thing, but we said, you know what? We're just gonna do it. We're gonna make it happen. And we did. But we had a good city attorney, you know, Mike Jenkins. We had Steve Burrell, and we had JR working on this. And it happened.
Yeah, before we started filming, you and Jay were sharing stories where you would get calls from staff. Like to come out to the pier. I mean, look, there's one thing sitting on a dais and making votes and, you know, trying to affect change. But then there's going out into the field and putting your hands-on stuff where you're literally taking your trade and now you're. So can you share just one little
Well, I have to tell a very funny story. It's kind of a sweet little story. I was mayor and I was architect, and we were redoing the pier, and it was my designs of the lifeguard tower and the gates and the lights and all that good. So Steve Burrell said, "Can you come and be in on the meeting with the construction administration company?" And Steve was very savvy. He was good at hiring good people. So he had this good group, and we were all in the conference room. Well, it's during the day, so I swing down from Santa Monica. I went to the dentist. I pick up my daughter, who at the time is maybe 1.5 or 2. We all get in there, and I'm the only woman, of course, and so we're into the big conference table, and I set my daughter down with her bunny rabbit and apple and my purse, and I said, just occupy yourself down there on the floor. So she did. So we're talking about things, I'm going through punch lists, we're dealing with it all. I'm not paying at all attention to her, no one is. And the big grand man who was the head of the construction administration company he was a little difficult, a little prickly and so forth. My daughter must have realized this. So she took the dental floss that I got at the dentist and she wound it. She was under the table. She wound a cage for her little stuffed bunny using his chair and the leg of the table. And she was busy doing this, and everyone wondered, Saul Lindenfeld and Steve wondered, where's Gina? I said, well, she's under there. And the guy couldn't move his chair. So the rest of us,
future architect.
we were all just laughing, and he wasn't laughing, but we thought it was everybody else thought it was funny. So yeah, I mean, during the day, or as JR and I were talking about at night, one night, the head of Public Works called us and said, JR, I need you to come out, look at the drawings, see if they're complying with what we really should be doing electrically, all the various ways that he could help me with structural issues that I could help. And we went out there at night several times, and not only
When they built the plaza.
Yeah, when they built the plaza too.
And these are things like your average citizen has no clue, like what above and beyond types of things that you would do. It's not just, again, making decisions or showing leadership in the community, but actually, putting the pedal to the metal and doing, and staff, if they realized they had some really capable contacts, no matter what your standing is in the community, they were going to take advantage of your skill sets.
Yeah, and
You
we had
were more than willing to go
EIRs.
into
JR
it.
and I were always looking at the EIRs and analyzing things and,
Well, to do it right, it took a lot of time. It really did. And
we built a lot.
God bless my wife, who put up with me for 16 years, you know.
But I think, the 90s were the best, and I'll lie about this, you're right, in the 2000s when I go there, because there was just so much to do. There was so much to get done. It was raw, and we were just knocking out these projects with this very low-key, brilliant city manager. And it was like 1, 2, 3. When the residents saw their Strand get rebuilt, it hadn't been rebuilt in 40 years.
At least.
Yeah, and I saw pictures from the 70s, which I still see, and I can still see that wall,
Yeah.
all the rebar coming through.
Yeah.
There was just no money to do it, and it was just, it takes a certain person who's got the experience to kind of, one at a time, and
Well, and I think his attitude really helped change the city staff attitude. Very much of the staff would come to us with various proposals of various things, city business, and they'd say, well, it's only Hermosa. We're like, what do you mean it's only Hermosa? What does that mean? And that was the attitude. And I think we went a long ways to change that, along with Steve.
there was no holiday party before we got elected, and I remember it was so hilarious, and I got a lot of gaff from people. So I was talking, I'm an employer, and I said, look, you're on the team. Just don't pout, just come and have a few drinks.
Right.
And enjoy the show. And they came a little bit, the fire department was reluctant, and there were some issues there, but in the end, they're all coming, and they're just loving Bergie, acting like a complete maniac with a microphone in his hand, singing songs. I mean, he's pretty funny. So it was like entertainment by Bergie at the stage, and they're all there looking at us.
Well, I hate to admit it, all 5 of us sang.
Yeah, I know we did. But I remember going out, and I probably had, way, way more. And Heine in the cop car said, Mr. Edgerton, could I give you a ride home? And I said, yes, that's a great idea.
This is early Uber, is what you're saying?
Yeah, but everybody was now coming to a party. It was just, it was a different feel, and we would go to Burrell.
Well, and we'd go out for beers afterwards very often.
Oh,
I mean, our meetings were long, but not all of them were that long. They were very, very long meetings.
We had a lot to do.
We did. So 1 a.m, 1:30, not unusual, but there were times that we'd knock off at 10, and we would all go out together, all 5 of us, whether we agreed, disagreed, calling each other. I was always called the artichoke. He was the big ego, and everybody had names. We all had names, but we got it done.
Bergie was just Bergie.
Bergie was Bergie. You didn't need to say more on that one.
Oh, actually.
Yeah.
But I mean, we always went out drinking afterwards because you're sitting on the council. You got to work with them, even though their opinions suck. I mean, I had JR. Yeah, I mean,
He's right here, as you know.
oh, he is? Where is he? He's hiding. Anyway, and I mean, he's used to this shit. But I mean, the thing is that people took it seriously. I mean, they get so angry. Like, I went through, because of all the controversy, I went through 4 recalls. In fact, I don't know if somebody could check on this, but 4 is the maximum. I mean, I got the record as far as the amount of recalls. And I didn't, I mean, Sambus was also getting recalled with me too. And he would get all pissed off. What are you talking about? I mean, I would show up to recall meetings and ask them if they needed any help, I was wanting them to be successful because it was only $300 a month, And although now I voted for the pay raise. That's because beer prices went up during it and I needed more beer money. But so we went out drinking afterwards, and that's what these. It turns out on council you can see people who hate each other. I mean, some do. I mean, it's just. I mean, hell, you're on council. You get paid this paltry amount of money, and you're getting people bitching and moaning. I mean, why don't you? just go out and have a beer with each other, you know? I mean, like, just, you know, and who knows, you might find something in common.
John, I've got one more question for you off script. And
Oh, no, not off script.
off script, off script. You know where the bodies are buried. You've been here since, since the Dead Sea was barely sick. And but I'd like to, and you've been out traveling for the last few years and so on and so forth. If you could come back and be a council person for 3 or 4 months, what do you see and what do you really think we need to adjust right now? What do you see that kind of needs a little oil and a little maintenance?
And I try and keep track of what goes on in Hermosa, but I don't follow it, of course, the way I used to.
Plausible deniability.
Yeah, exactly. But basically, it's the tone of the council and working together. The one thing about the council we had was, despite our very different personalities, we had fun. We were noted as being one of the most fun councils when we traveled around the state and had all these conferences and so forth.
But they called it Tuesday Night Live.
Exactly. And one of the every night after a council meeting, we went out drinking afterwards. And I always viewed it as rugby. That on the tradition in rugby is you go out and knock the living crap out of each other in the game, and then you all go out drinking together and confirm the fact that it was just a game, you know, no hard feelings and things. So you have to, if you're going to accomplish anything, you have to find ways of working together. And so even if we would fight like cats and dogs during the meeting over an issue, we'd go out and laugh about it afterwards, and we'd have the city attorney and the city manager. We were all there just getting along, and that is, getting along for the good of the city is the most important thing. That's what you're elected to do.
I think a big part of the success was compromise. We'd take all the varying opinions that we had on whatever topic we were discussing, and we would massage it so everybody could work with it. Everybody would accept it, you know? And, I think that brought together some pretty good things I thought we did.
We did a lot of it.
I just felt that I could contribute. And I think one of the reasons that our council accomplished so much, and we did accomplish a lot. I went through my scrapbook and I was amazed that we had enough time to do all the things that we did.
It was a very unique council.
But I serve with I'm a construction superintendent by trade. I serve with an architect, I serve with an attorney, I serve with an engineer.
Yeah.
And who am I missing?
A bar owner, the one.
Oh, a bar owner, a business owner, of course. So
Everybody brought something to the table.
That's right. Well,
So
we were all business owners too.
Yeah, and we had, it was we all seemed to click.
Yeah.
And that was certainly refreshing to me and to, I'm sure, a lot of the public.
Well, I think that's a good, John, I'm just going to thank you for coming today and answering these questions and going from whatever planet you are visiting at the particular time. And it's great to have you here, John. Thank you so much for all of your hard work all those years, and thank you much for just being a friend to me and a friend to our town.
Oh, the pleasure's been mine. I've been the lucky recipient of all that.
Isn't that right, JR? I got recalled more than anybody in the history of Hermosa.
You did what?
I got recalled more than anybody. I got 4 recalls on my
You
name.
want to save that story?
Come on. I mean, like, if you and I did that, we'd be in the pokey fending off Leroy. Well, there are, times that I've gotten drunk and I peed in people's backyards. That happens. JR, you're beautiful. JR taught me everything I know. I really did.
I'm not here.
Okay. Okay, how do I look anyway, JR? He's not here for the truth meeting. He wants me.
Well, that.
You know, I introduced him to the whole Latino caucus up in Sacramento as my gay lover,
The
JR.
architecture test is already flushed.
I'm sure, I don't know about I don't think you're a drinker. You know, this is Fishman, you know. But remember that guy? He wore lifts. What a fucking crook. Yeah, no, but they were lifts. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.